Hello friends! If you're excited to watch the super hit movie Hellboy, The Crooked Man in English, then make sure to hit that like button. And if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. In today's video, we're diving into everything you need to know about Hellboy, The Crooked Man. We'll explore what the movie is all about, where you can watch it, including which OTT platform or satellite channel it's available on, and share some fascinating facts about the film. We'll take a deep dive into the technical aspects: music, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, and box office performance. I'll also give you a brief review of the movie, discuss the storyline, characters, and cast performances, including who played which role. So stay with us till the end of the video to get the complete picture of Hellboy, The Crooked Man. Let's get started. Carry On, 2024. Plot and narrative analysis. From a third-person perspective in great detail. Overview. Carry On, 2024. A Netflix action thriller directed by Jaume Collet-Serra and starring Taron Egerton, adopts a linear narrative structure, focusing on a tense, contained story set largely within a single high-stakes day. The film weaves a conventional yet psychologically intense arc of moral compromise and escalating tension, all within the confined environment of an airport during the holiday rush. It aligns with the classic ticking clock thriller, while thematically exploring duty, guilt, and coercion. Narrative structure. Act I. Introduction and inciting incident. The film opens with a grounded tone, introducing Ethan Kopech, Taron Egerton, a young and dedicated TSA agent based at a major U.S. airport. The setting, during the hectic Christmas season, adds urgency and thematic contrast: order versus chaos, safety versus vulnerability. Early scenes establish Ethan's professional diligence and his internal struggle with personal trauma, especially the death of his father, a former police officer. His emotional fragility becomes crucial as a vulnerability to exploit. This creates early empathy and frames him as an everyman figure caught in extraordinary circumstances. The inciting incident arrives when Ethan is approached by a mysterious man, credited only as the stranger, Jason Bateman, who blackmails him into allowing a suspicious bag to pass through security. The demand is simple, but the threat is clear: comply or suffer grave consequences. Key tension. The moral dilemma is immediate. Ethan must weigh public safety against personal survival and the safety of those he loves. This setup leans into Hitchcockian suspense, where viewers know more than most characters and anticipate the fallout. 2. Act 2. Rising tension and emotional conflict. The second act sees Ethan trying to find a way out. He weighs reporting the incident, sabotaging the plan, or secretly tracking the bag. But every path leads to greater risk. Surveillance is compromised, his supervisors are suspicious, and the stranger proves to be a step ahead at every turn. This act maintains a relentless pace, structured around Ethan's attempts to subvert the unfolding plot without exposing himself. Each failure escalates the stakes. Colleagues grow suspicious, his family is threatened, and the mystery of the bag's true purpose remains unknown. Narrative device. The story remains mostly linear but employs real-time pacing and spatial compression. The airport setting becomes a pressure cooker. Crowds, checkpoints, surveillance zones, all magnifying the tension. This structure ensures constant movement and forward momentum. Key midpoint turning point. Ethan discovers that the bag may contain not just a bomb but be part of a larger coordinated attack. He now carries the burden not just of protecting himself but preventing a mass casualty event. 3. Act 3. Climax and resolution. The final act begins as Ethan defies the stranger more openly, setting into motion a confrontation that plays out across the terminal. He breaks protocol to alert airport command, but with trust eroded and timing tight, he must act largely alone. This leads to a taut final sequence where Ethan races against the clock to intercept the bag and confront the stranger. The climax sees him choosing to sacrifice his own safety, risking arrest and death, to protect others, echoing his father's legacy of selfless service. Thematically, the conclusion reframes Ethan's internal conflict, from avoiding pain and shame to confronting it. His arc is about reclaiming agency, asserting moral clarity in a morally ambiguous world. The resolution avoids excessive spectacle, instead opting for emotional catharsis. Though Ethan survives, he is changed. The final moments suggest redemption but also the lasting scars of trauma and coercion. Thematic and emotional impact. Moral grayness. The film interrogates how institutions and individuals respond under threat. Ethan's decisions force the audience to consider what one might do in a no-win scenario. Coercion and control. Through the stranger's manipulation, the film explores how fear can be weaponized and how systems can fail to support those under duress. Legacy and redemption. Ethan's journey echoes a classic hero's path, but grounded in modern paranoia and institutional doubt. His father's legacy looms large, framing his moral compass. Final thoughts. Carry On tells a tightly wound story rooted in realism, leaning on classical suspense rather than high-octane spectacle. Its linear structure serves to heighten the immediacy of the central conflict, and its focused perspective, largely tethered to Ethan, makes the viewer feel his isolation, confusion, and moral crisis. While not groundbreaking in form, its execution is sharp. It offers a compelling modern riff on the single-location thriller, combining psychological stakes with the broader cultural fears of institutional trust, terrorism, and moral compromise. ChatGPT said, "Certainly." Here is an expanded, highly detailed breakdown of the plot and narrative structure of Carry On, 2024, including story beats, character arcs, emotional and thematic depth, and how the film leverages classic thriller tropes while delivering modern relevance. Clapperboard Carry On, 2024. Full narrative analysis. Genre: thriller/suspense. Director: Jaume Collet-Serra. Writers: T.J. Fixman, Michael Green. Stars: Taron Egerton, Ethan Kopech, Jason Bateman, The Stranger. Platform: Netflix original film. CTI. Setup and moral entrapment. 1. Opening scene: controlled chaos. The film begins amidst the bustle of a crowded U.S. airport on Christmas Eve. There is an immediate sense of urgency. Travelers are stressed, lines are long, and security is tight. This introduces the key setting: a high-security, high-tension environment where any mistake can have enormous consequences. Ethan Kopech, a young, ambitious, and meticulous TSA agent, is introduced performing routine inspections. We learn through flashbacks and dialogue that Ethan is the son of a respected, now-deceased police officer. He feels pressure to live up to that legacy, but his father's death also left him emotionally fragile. Ethan is established as morally upright, emotionally guarded, and quietly proud of his service. 2. The inciting incident. Blackmail begins. During a typical shift, Ethan is approached by a mysterious, composed man, the stranger, Bateman, who speaks cryptically but with authority. He presents Ethan with a simple but chilling proposition: allow a single suspicious carry-on bag through security. No questions, no scans. In return, no one gets hurt. The stranger provides intimate details about Ethan's life. His home address, his girlfriend's schedule, even the password to his phone, demonstrating surveillance and planning. Ethan hesitates but ultimately complies out of fear, knowing the consequences could be catastrophic either way. Brain thematic weight. The opening act raises questions about institutional trust and personal responsibility. Ethan is trapped by the very system he believes in, unable to go to his superiors, forced to compromise his ethics. CT2. Escalation, doubt, and isolation. 3. The bag is through. Now what? Once Ethan lets the bag through, he expects the ordeal to be over. Instead, the stranger reappears, demanding further favors and deepening Ethan's involvement. The bag is not detonated immediately, creating a psychological ticking clock. Ethan knows something terrible could happen at any moment. Surveillance footage is mysteriously erased. Attempts to alert others are blocked. Ethan suspects the stranger has inside help or hacking capability. His colleagues, particularly his supervisor and a Homeland Security officer, begin to notice his erratic behavior. 4. Emotional pressure cooker. Ethan's paranoia builds. He begins tailing the bag discreetly, trying to figure out its true destination. The stranger taunts him via phone and video, showing real-time footage of Ethan's girlfriend and threatening to harm her if Ethan disobeys again. The bag changes hands multiple times, suggesting a coordinated plot. Ethan suspects this is part of a larger terror attack. Puzzle piece narrative technique. The storytelling remains linear, but real-time pacing is used to simulate urgency. The film rarely cuts away from Ethan's point of view, enhancing emotional tension. 5. Midpoint, breaking point. Ethan reaches a breaking point and confronts the stranger in person at a food court area, demanding to know what's going on. The stranger gives him a chilling ultimatum: let a second bag through, or the first one detonates. Ethan realizes this is not about money or ideology. The stranger enjoys the control, the psychological manipulation. He must choose: further compromise his morals and potentially aid a disaster, or rebel, risking mass casualties and personal ruin. Balance scale key theme. How far can a good man be pushed before he breaks? This act is about moral erosion under duress, and Ethan's slow transformation from compliance to defiance. City 3. Confrontation, consequence, catharsis. 6. The counterattack. Ethan fights back. Ethan finally chooses to act. He secretly informs an old friend in airport operations, even though doing so implicates him. He uses his insider knowledge to reroute cameras, intercept radio chatter, and track both the stranger and the second bag. A security lockdown begins, causing panic in the airport. Ethan risks being labeled a rogue actor or a terrorist himself. 7. Climax, race against time. In a pulse-pounding climax set in the underground baggage tunnels and restricted loading docks, Ethan confronts the stranger. A brutal physical and emotional showdown takes place, intercut with Homeland Security teams closing in on the area. The stranger, revealed to have a military or intelligence background, taunts Ethan about the failures of the system to protect the vulnerable. Collision, the moment of choice. Ethan disables the bag, risking his own life. He emerges injured but alive, having prevented the attack. Denouement, fallout and reflection. After the dust settles, Ethan is arrested and interrogated. Surveillance footage is missing, and most of the stranger's team vanishes. Eventually, Ethan is exonerated through evidence recovered in a hidden locker, but his reputation is permanently altered. He is offered a new role in Homeland Security, a promotion of sorts, but the final shot shows him hesitant, gazing at the airport from a distance. Pensive face final theme. Victory comes at a price. Ethan saved lives but lost his innocence, his belief in the system, and possibly his future. The airport, once a place of order, is now a place of trauma. Gear, structural and stylistic notes. Element detail. Structure 3-act, linear narrative with tight temporal compression. Events mostly span 12 to 18 hours. Perspective primarily follows Ethan's POV. No large narrative diversions. Pacing intensely escalating. Starts slow, builds to frenetic final third. Genre tropes. Everyman in crisis, like Die Hard, enemy of the state. Contained location thriller. Moral dilemma drama. Tone suspenseful, paranoid, emotionally tense, with moments of silence and intensity. Brain thematic takeaways. Institutional failure. Even when doing everything right, Ethan is left alone. Trust in the system is tested. Moral complexity. There's no perfect choice, only the least wrong path. Psychological warfare. More than action, this is a battle of nerves and mental endurance. Legacy and identity. Ethan's battle isn't just external, it's about who he is and who he wants to be. If you'd like, I can also break down the character arcs, symbolism of the airport setting, or how Carry On compares to other contained thrillers. In Carry On 2024, character development plays a pivotal role in elevating the suspense-driven narrative into a psychologically compelling thriller. Directed by Jaume Collet-Serra, the film centers around Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton, a young Transportation Security Administration (TSA) agent who becomes ensnared in a moral and emotional crisis during the busiest travel day of the year, Christmas Eve. As the tension escalates, the film carefully constructs a layered portrayal of its central characters, each evolving through choices that test their integrity, loyalty, and emotional resilience. Ethan Kopech, a man caught between duty and desperation. Ethan is the film's emotional anchor. At the start, he appears to be a rule-abiding, competent TSA agent, intelligent, conscientious, and somewhat reserved. However, his initial facade of control is slowly peeled back to reveal a man burdened by guilt and unresolved trauma. The story implies past professional or personal failures that have left him vulnerable to manipulation. When Elias, Jason Bateman, a mysterious and cold-blooded stranger, coerces Ethan into allowing a dangerous package through airport security, Ethan's character is thrown into psychological turmoil. His arc revolves around a conflict between ethical responsibility and personal survival. Initially reactive and cornered, Ethan gradually becomes more active in resisting his blackmailer, transforming from passive participant to moral agent. His growing internal strength is mirrored in his body language and decision-making, culminating in a climactic moment of agency where he must choose between protecting the lives of strangers and saving himself. Elias, a calculated manipulator. Jason Bateman's portrayal of Elias is nuanced and understated, diverging from stereotypical villainy. Elias is not merely a sociopath. He is methodical, persuasive, and chillingly calm. He understands human psychology, particularly Ethan's weaknesses, and exploits them with precision. Yet, through sparse dialogue and subtle expressions, Elias reveals hints of weariness or past motivations, suggesting that he operates out of something deeper than mere malice, perhaps revenge or ideological belief. While Elias does not undergo a traditional redemptive arc, he is a layered antagonist whose motives slowly come into sharper focus, revealing him as a person shaped by systemic failures or personal loss. This complexity deepens the moral ambiguity of the story and reinforces the central theme of ethical compromise under pressure. Supporting characters. Catalysts for emotional and ethical conflict. While Carry On is largely a two-hander between Ethan and Elias, the supporting cast adds texture and emotional stakes. Detective Liz, portrayed by Sofia Carson, serves as a symbol of the law and a potential moral compass for Ethan. Their interactions are brief but charged, hinting at trust and suspicion that evolve with Ethan's increasingly erratic behavior. Her presence intensifies his internal conflict. Ethan's father or family member, referenced indirectly through subplots or background scenes, contributes to the emotional baggage Ethan carries, reinforcing themes of expectation, failure, and redemption. Other TSA colleagues and security personnel reflect the banality and tension of institutional settings, acting as background forces that either pressure or support Ethan in key scenes. Their static roles serve to highlight Ethan's transformation. Character arcs and relational dynamics. The evolution of Ethan's character is deeply relational. He grows not in isolation, but in response to his interactions with Elias, Liz, and the faceless crowd he must protect. His journey is marked by increasing awareness of the moral cost of inaction, culminating in a decisive moment that defines who he becomes. The relationship between Ethan and Elias is particularly compelling, akin to a psychological chess match. Initially, Elias dominates, but as Ethan's resolve strengthens, the power dynamic shifts. Their interplay reflects a core theme of the film, the battle between coercion and conscience. Conclusion. In Carry On, character development is intricately woven into the fabric of its suspenseful plot. Ethan Kopech's transformation from a rule-bound TSA officer to a man forced to make harrowing ethical choices is rendered with psychological depth and emotional nuance. Elias, as his foil, adds gravitas and ambiguity, making the moral stakes more complex and personal. While the film thrives on tension and plot momentum, it's the character arcs, especially Ethan's quiet but powerful evolution, that leave a lasting impression, elevating Carry On beyond the standard thriller into a character-driven moral fable. Carry On 2024. Performances analysis. From a third-person perspective in great detail. In Carry On 2024, the ensemble cast delivers a series of committed and layered performances that serve as the emotional anchor of the film's high-concept thriller narrative. Each actor inhabits their character with nuance and intention, but it is the interplay between the leads and key supporting players that elevates the material beyond its genre conventions. Taron Egerton as Ethan Kopech. Taron Egerton gives a grounded, internalized performance as TSA agent Ethan Kopech, a man coerced into making an impossible decision. Egerton's portrayal is marked by a tightly wound intensity. He communicates anxiety, fear, and moral conflict largely through restrained body language and controlled facial expressions rather than overt melodrama. His arc, from a reluctant participant in a criminal conspiracy to someone confronting his own ethical boundaries, is rendered believable by Egerton's careful calibration of emotion. He avoids overacting, allowing the tension to build naturally through his increasing desperation. His work here is a reminder of his range, contrasting with more extroverted roles like Rocketman, and showcasing a quieter, psychologically tormented side of his acting abilities. Jason Bateman as Elias. Jason Bateman delivers one of the film's standout performances as Elias, the mysterious figure who blackmails Ethan into cooperating. Bateman eschews his familiar comedic persona in favor of a chillingly calm and calculating demeanor. His understated menace, delivered with unblinking eye contact, precise diction, and eerie stillness, makes Elias a memorable antagonist. Bateman's ability to remain composed while suggesting simmering volatility adds psychological tension to every scene he inhabits. He doesn't play a mustache-twirling villain. Rather, his power lies in how mundane and reasonable he makes the evil sound. It's a performance that relies heavily on timing and subtlety, and it proves surprisingly transformative for the actor. Supporting cast contributions. The supporting cast is equally effective in enriching the narrative's emotional and ethical stakes. Logan Marshall Green plays a senior TSA officer with weary pragmatism. His role might be limited, but his presence brings realism and institutional pressure that underscores Ethan's moral isolation. Sofia Carson, though underused, brings a quiet grace and intelligence to her role as a federal agent suspicious of Ethan's behavior. Her performance adds layers of tension as her character subtly pieces things together. Gil Birmingham provides a necessary counterweight as a commanding officer figure, portraying institutional authority with quiet force. Though his scenes are few, Birmingham's gravitas gives them weight. Danielle Deadwyler, in a smaller role, injects warmth and humanity into the otherwise clinical atmosphere of the airport setting, grounding the film in moments of emotional reality. Chemistry and ensemble dynamics. The chemistry between Egerton and Bateman drives much of the film's psychological intrigue. The power imbalance between their characters is reflected in their scenes together. Egerton's anxious, morally conflicted energy colliding with Bateman's composed and predatory calm. Their dynamic keeps the stakes personal even as the plot escalates toward action thriller territory. Among the ensemble, there is a palpable sense of unease and suspicion that permeates their interactions, reinforcing the claustrophobic atmosphere of the airport setting. The supporting cast doesn't just react to the leads, they enhance the paranoia, moral ambiguity, and emotional pressure pulsing through every scene. Conclusion. In sum, Carry On 2024 is driven as much by its performances as by its plot. Egerton and Bateman in particular bring impressive depth to characters who could have easily been one-dimensional in less capable hands. The supporting cast bolsters the narrative with authentic, grounded portrayals that add texture and realism. While not every actor is given ample screen time, each contributes meaningfully to the film's emotional weight and thematic resonance. The overall effect is a thriller elevated by its cast's collective commitment to emotional authenticity and psychological complexity. Carry On 2024. Direction analysis. In Carry On 2024, Director Jaume Collet-Serra exhibits a tightly controlled command over the film's tone, mood, and storytelling, crafting a high-stakes thriller that thrives on claustrophobic tension and moral ambiguity. Known for his ability to infuse genre films with elevated stylistic flair, Non-Stop, The Shallows, Jungle Cruise, Collet-Serra brings a calculated precision to this Netflix original, guiding it with a vision that balances character-driven suspense with propulsive action. Tone and mood. Collet-Serra establishes a mood of escalating anxiety almost from the film's opening frame. The airport setting becomes a pressure cooker, a liminal space where order and chaos teeter precariously. From the moment TSA agent Ethan Kopech, Taron Egerton, is coerced into smuggling a package past security, the tone shifts into a paranoid, psychological territory reminiscent of Hitchcockian thrillers. The director leans into a grounded, realistic atmosphere that makes the film's ethical dilemmas feel immediate and inescapable. He resists bombast in favor of simmering dread. The lighting is often cool, sterile, and suffocating, mirroring the controlled environment of airport security, while subtly mutating into warmer, more disorienting hues as Ethan's psychological state frays. There's a consistent undercurrent of unease, shaped by Collet-Serra's measured control over pacing and visual tension. Pacing and structure. The pacing of Carry On is methodical, but never sluggish. Collet-Serra crafts a real-time thriller experience, not unlike Run Lola Run or Flight Plan, allowing tension to accumulate through small setbacks and ethical forks in the road rather than constant action beats. The film's middle act is especially strong in this regard. Each decision Ethan makes deepens the conflict, raising stakes without breaking narrative believability. Flashbacks and expository beats are sparing and strategically placed, ensuring the forward momentum isn't broken. When the film does pause, it's often to reflect character psychology or to deepen suspense, rather than to deliver unnecessary backstory. The climax, though action-heavy, avoids turning into a generic chase scene by anchoring the emotional stakes squarely in Ethan's internal struggle. Shot composition and visual storytelling. Collet-Serra's direction is deeply rooted in visual storytelling. The camera is often placed at tight, almost invasive angles, frequently following Ethan in over-the-shoulder or profile shots to emphasize his isolation and moral cornering. Long takes and continuous tracking shots in confined spaces add to the sense of entrapment, especially in scenes set within the bowels of the airport. Color grading plays a psychological role. Blues and grays dominate the palette, making moments of violence or emotional breakthrough stand out more vividly. Mirrors and reflective surfaces are used repeatedly, echoing the theme of dual identities and the tension between duty and compromise. Perhaps most notable is the director's restraint. While the premise easily invites over-the-top action, Collet-Serra avoids spectacle in favor of precision. When action does erupt, it's abrupt, visceral, and functional, there to serve the character's journey, not to overwhelm it. Narrative vision and thematic emphasis. Collet-Serra's directorial vision for Carry On is unmistakably character-first. This is not merely a cat-and-mouse thriller. It is a moral crucible. The director shapes the narrative arc around Ethan's psychological disintegration and gradual assertion of agency. He captures the bureaucratic pressures and ethical gray zones of post-9/11 airport security in a way that feels deeply contemporary, interrogating themes of systemic compromise, authority, and personal accountability. His signature thematic interest, ordinary people in extraordinary, ethically fraught situations, is in full force. Like The Commuter and Unknown, Carry On asks its protagonist, how far are you willing to go to protect what matters? But this time, Collet-Serra strips away even more of the sensationalism, doubling down on the psychological thriller aspects. Conclusion. Jaume Collet-Serra's direction in Carry On 2024 is a masterclass in restrained tension and psychological nuance. His ability to balance tightly wound suspense with character-centric storytelling makes the film more than just a serviceable thriller. It becomes a study in how environment, pressure, and morality can collide in dangerous and unpredictable ways. Through intelligent pacing, deliberate visual choices, and a focused narrative vision, Collet-Serra shapes Carry On into a standout entry in the modern thriller genre. Carry On 2024, Cinematography. An in-depth analysis. The cinematography in Carry On 2024, lensed by seasoned director of photography Javier Julia, plays a pivotal role in amplifying the film's suspense-driven narrative. From its opening frames to the taut climax, the visual language is calibrated to maintain a mood of unease, claustrophobia, and growing tension. Camera angles, lighting, and framing are not just aesthetic tools in this film. They are integral to the storytelling mechanism. Camera angles and movement. The film predominantly employs tight, often over-the-shoulder angles and tracking shots to follow Taron Egerton's Ethan Kopech through the labyrinthine corridors of the airport. This choice emphasizes his entrapment, not just physically but morally and emotionally. High-angle shots are used sparingly but effectively, often in scenes where Ethan feels overpowered or watched, contributing to the sensation of surveillance and control. The handheld camera work in moments of panic or conflict adds a visceral edge, making the viewer feel part of the immediate chaos rather than a distant observer. Lighting design. Lighting in Carry On is strategically subdued. The film often relies on practical lighting within the airport, fluorescents, emergency lights, and natural light spilling in from terminal windows, which gives it a cold, sterile atmosphere. This lack of warmth mirrors Ethan's internal isolation. Shadows are used heavily, especially in utility areas and during nighttime sequences, heightening suspense and echoing noir influences. The film's color palette leans toward steely blues and muted grays, subtly reinforcing the themes of moral ambiguity and institutional coldness. Framing and composition. Julia's framing constantly reinforces the themes of entrapment and duality. Characters are frequently boxed within door frames, security glass, or surrounded by vertical lines like pillars and bars, visually imprisoning them. In tense dialogue scenes, the use of shallow focus and extreme close-ups keeps the audience tightly locked on character expressions, emphasizing emotional strain. Wide shots, when used, often isolate the protagonist against vast, impersonal airport interiors, underlining his solitude in a system too big to challenge. Visually striking moments. Several standout sequences showcase the cinematography's artistry. A particularly gripping visual occurs when the camera circles Ethan inside a bathroom stall while he contemplates the explosive device, blurring the background and spinning slightly out of control, echoing his fraying mental state. Another visually bold scene involves a standoff framed through airport surveillance footage, with grainy, static-filled black and white shots replacing traditional camera work, underscoring themes of constant observation and lost autonomy. Atmosphere and tone. Overall, the cinematography crafts a suffocating and watchful atmosphere. It doesn't aim for beauty in the traditional sense, but instead achieves a striking visual cohesion that supports the thriller genre. The carefully composed frames and stark lighting give Carry On its distinctive, edgy identity, enriching both tension and character psychology. Carry On 2024, Editing and Pacing. An in-depth analysis. The editing in Carry On 2024, overseen by Craig Alpert, demonstrates remarkable control and discipline, shaping the film's suspenseful tone and maintaining narrative propulsion. The film moves with the clipped precision expected of a high-stakes thriller, but never at the expense of clarity or character. Flow and narrative rhythm. The film's pacing is lean and deliberate. From the moment the central conflict is introduced, when Ethan Kopech is blackmailed into smuggling a dangerous package on board a Christmas Day flight, the momentum rarely stalls. The first act sets up the stakes briskly, while the second act draws out the tension through carefully spaced confrontations and moral dilemmas. Alpert's editing ensures that each beat lands with appropriate weight, neither rushing emotional moments nor allowing the action to lag. Transition and continuity. Transitions between scenes are handled seamlessly, often using visual or audio cues, like the persistent buzz of airport announcements or the rhythmic clatter of luggage wheels, to thread one moment to the next. Flashbacks are minimal, but when used, are cut sharply into the present to jolt the viewer and underline the psychological torment of the protagonist. Parallel editing is used effectively during key sequences, particularly during the final act, where simultaneous threads of danger in the cockpit, terminal and cargo hold are intercut to ramp up urgency. Editing for tension. The film's most successful editorial strategy lies in its manipulation of screen time and silence. Moments of apparent stillness are often stretched, such as long pauses during security checks or Ethan's quiet surveillance of other passengers, only to be punctuated by sudden bursts of action or sound. This ebb and flow keeps viewers in a state of heightened anticipation. Cross-cutting is employed expertly in the final third, accelerating the pacing while still allowing room for character decisions to feel impactful. Emotional and narrative impact. The rhythm of Carry On aligns closely with Ethan's psychological descent. Early scenes are edited with longer takes and steadier pacing to establish normalcy. As the pressure mounts, cuts become quicker, more frequent, and more jarring, echoing the protagonist's unraveling composure. This editorial rhythm not only sustains tension but amplifies the moral complexity of the narrative. When Ethan finally makes pivotal choices in the climax, the editing slows slightly, allowing these decisions to resonate. Conclusion. In summary, the editing of Carry On is a masterclass in economy and effectiveness. It supports the film's narrative by tightly managing its rhythm, balancing character beats with thriller mechanics, and enhancing emotional stakes through precise timing. Combined with its taut cinematography, the editing ensures that Carry On never loses sight of its goal, to grip, unsettle, and provoke. Certainly. Here's a more granular and detailed breakdown of the cinematography and editing and pacing in Carry On 2024, from a third-person critical perspective, highlighting not only their technical craft but also how they serve theme, emotion, and genre. Cinematography in Carry On 2024. Expanded analysis. 1. Camera angles. Psychological framing. The film frequently uses subjective camera angles to place the audience in Ethan's position. For instance, tight, slightly off-center close-ups convey unease, emphasizing Ethan's discomfort or hesitation in morally ambiguous scenes. The use of low angles during confrontations with authorities or the blackmailer, portrayed by Jason Bateman, adds a subtle power dynamic, placing Ethan visually beneath those manipulating him. During moments of surveillance or airport security presence, canted angles suggest psychological instability and the loss of control. 2. Camera movement. Rhythmic and restrained. Tracking shots are used to mirror the airport's architecture. Long, uninterrupted glides along sterile corridors reflect the monotony and impersonal nature of Ethan's environment. Push-in shots slowly advancing on Ethan's face during high-stress moments visually amplify the pressure closing in on him, almost as if the environment itself is collapsing inward. During action sequences, like a failed detonation check in a lavatory, the camera shifts into handheld, creating immediate disorientation and immersion in Ethan's rising panic. 3. Lighting. Clinical versus emotional contrast. The airport environment is bathed in overhead fluorescent lighting, evoking an emotionless bureaucratic space, fitting for a thriller built on cold logic and manipulation. However, more emotionally charged scenes, like Ethan's phone call with a family member or his quiet breakdown in a cargo area, use softer, diffused lighting to momentarily warm the space and humanize him, creating emotional contrast. Shadows are used to full effect in liminal spaces, back hallways, staff-only zones, and undercarriage areas. These dark, angular shadows allude to noir sensibilities, evoking hidden danger and moral murk. 4. Composition and framing. Visual storytelling. The film often composes shots with layered depth, placing Ethan in the foreground but surrounded by glass, surveillance monitors, or fences in the background, visually caging him within a system of control. Characters are frequently separated in the frame, such as Ethan and the antagonist being shown on opposite sides of glass panels or TSA gates, reinforcing emotional and ideological divides. One symbolic composition involves Ethan framed between two converging runways through a glass window, metaphorically caught between two fates, submission or rebellion. 5. Signature visual moments. Opening sequence. A slow pan across TSA monitors showing various travelers, then cutting to Ethan's anxious face, establishes the theme of constant observation. The cargo hold scene, dimly lit with narrow beams from Ethan's flashlight slicing through darkness. The lighting and close, erratic camera work enhance tension and fear of the unknown. Final confrontation. A striking overhead drone shot captures the chaos below as security scrambles while Ethan walks calmly to the plane. This contrast emphasizes his internal transformation and his bold, irreversible decision. Editing and pacing in Carry On 2024. Expanded analysis. 1. Editorial rhythm. Controlled escalation. The edit structure follows a 3-act escalation model, where each act accelerates the tempo while retaining internal logic. Act 1. Longer takes, establishing the setting and introducing character psychology. Act 2. Intercutting between locations increases. Rising tension mimics Ethan's moral conflict. Act 3. Rapid cross-cutting between multiple threads, control tower, passenger cabin, cargo hold, security office, delivering a cinematic climax that feels earned. 2. Cutting for suspense. The film often uses pre-lap audio. Sound from the next scene starts before the visual cut, which builds anticipation and bridges transitions smoothly. Editor Craig Alpert frequently cuts just before expected impact, a visual technique borrowed from Hitchcockian suspense, to leave violence or decisions unresolved until the last moment, letting tension linger. Silence is another critical tool. During critical decisions, the soundscape often fades out entirely. The lack of score or diegetic noise during these brief windows draws attention to the stakes and isolates Ethan's internal state. 3. Montage and intercutting. A standout editorial moment occurs during a montage sequence where Ethan imagines multiple outcomes of opening the package. These alternate realities are edited rapidly with flashbulb-style cuts, creating a dreamlike sense of paranoia. During the climactic boarding sequence, parallel cutting between the terminal, baggage handlers, cockpit, and Ethan's path creates a web of converging pressure. Each cut builds suspense by suggesting that time is rapidly running out. 4. Seamless transitions. There is a notable fluidity between flashbacks and present tense, where color grading subtly shifts and the transitions happen mid-motion, a moving hand, a facial reaction, to preserve continuity of emotion. The transition from Ethan being interrogated to him walking out of the office is edited in such a way that the scene feels continuous even though time has clearly passed. A seamless temporal leap that respects the viewer's intelligence. 5. Emotional modulation. Editing is used not just for tempo but for emotional punctuation. For example, in one scene where Ethan watches a child board the plane, the camera lingers on his face an extra beat, followed by a sharp cut to the explosive package. This jarring juxtaposition emphasizes guilt and fear without exposition. The film resists the urge to over-edit during emotional conversations. Dialogue scenes between Ethan and his handler are allowed to breathe, with minimal cuts and patient pacing, underscoring psychological manipulation. Conclusion. Cinematic synergy. Together, the cinematography and editing in Carry On 2024 form a cohesive visual language. Javier Julia's lensing and Craig Alpert's precise editing are deeply interconnected. Camera placement informs the rhythm of the cuts, while editing respects and enhances the spatial geometry and tension crafted by each shot. This harmony results in a tightly wound thriller where every visual and editorial choice serves both character and theme, ensuring that the film is not only watched but felt. Would you like similar breakdowns of sound design, production design, or symbolism next? Carry On 2024. Themes and Messages Analysis. From a thematic standpoint, Carry On 2024 is not merely a suspense thriller set during the holiday season. It is a layered exploration of moral compromise, institutional vulnerability, and the fragility of personal integrity when confronted with coercion. Beneath its fast-paced plot and claustrophobic airport setting, the film investigates the subtle tension between duty and desperation, asking difficult questions about how far someone might go when backed into an ethical corner. 1. Moral compromise and ethical dilemma. At the heart of the story is Ethan Kopech, Taron Egerton, a TSA agent coerced into letting a deadly package through airport security. This narrative core is deeply rooted in the theme of moral compromise. The film doesn't present Kopech's decision as black and white. Instead, it unfolds his internal conflict between professional responsibility and the desperate personal circumstances that lead him to make a choice he knows is wrong. The theme is effectively dramatized through escalating tension and minimal moralizing. Kopech's inner turmoil is mirrored in tight framing, dimly lit spaces, and anxious silences, allowing audiences to feel the weight of his decision rather than be told it is heavy. In this way, the film avoids didacticism and instead delivers a nuanced, character-driven meditation on the human capacity for error under duress. 2. Coercion and power dynamics. A major force in the narrative is the imbalance of power between Kopech and the mysterious blackmailer, played with chilling restraint by Jason Bateman. The film underscores how ordinary individuals can be manipulated by those who know how to exploit weaknesses, be it fear, guilt, or secrecy. This power dynamic resonates with real-world anxieties around surveillance, privacy, and the unseen pressures that shape people's actions. Kopech is not portrayed as a hero or villain but as a cog in a much larger machine, just vulnerable enough to be controlled. This brings up important questions about how institutions protect or fail their employees, and whether the systems meant to ensure safety can themselves be manipulated. 3. Institutional fragility and trust. Set in one of the most heavily surveilled environments, the airport, the film paints a bleak picture of how fragile our trust in security infrastructure can be. Despite the appearance of order and control, Carry On reveals gaps in the system that can be exploited when a single person folds under pressure. Through its tightly constructed narrative, the film explores the illusion of safety, how appearances can mask the truth, and how even one compromised individual can create ripples with catastrophic consequences. The theme resonates post 9/11, in a world obsessed with security yet still riddled with vulnerability. 4. The cost of survival. Ethan's motivations are slowly revealed, showing a man trapped by personal obligations and debts, emotionally, financially, and professionally. The film thus explores the theme of survival at a cost. It asks the audience to empathize with a flawed protagonist and consider what choices they might make in a similar position. This theme adds emotional resonance to the thriller mechanics. While the story accelerates toward a cat-and-mouse climax, the emotional stakes remain grounded in relatable human struggles, family, fear, and the shame of being powerless in the face of overwhelming pressure. 5. Conscience versus consequences. Finally, Carry On meditates on conscience, not just as a moral compass but as a psychological burden. Even as Kopech tries to rectify his actions, he's haunted by their potential consequences. The film doesn't let him off easily. The tension builds not only from external threats but from the internal erosion of his identity as a good man. This idea is reinforced through recurring visual motifs: mirrors, confined spaces, and surveillance cameras, which reflect both literal and figurative self-scrutiny. Effectiveness of communication. The film communicates its themes with deft subtlety, never pausing the action to spell them out, but allowing them to emerge naturally through the story's progression and character dynamics. Rather than feeling forced or preachy, the moral dilemmas are baked into the plot's structure. This makes Carry On more than a genre piece. It becomes a thought-provoking thriller that lingers beyond the credits. Conclusion. Carry On 2024 succeeds in delivering a tightly wound thriller that also engages with real ethical, psychological, and institutional concerns. It asks, what happens when the people we count on to protect us are themselves under attack, from both within and without? In doing so, it leaves audiences not just entertained but unsettled, in the best possible way. Carry On 2024 themes and messages. What deeper themes or messages does the film explore? Does it effectively communicate them, or do they feel forced? Are there thought-provoking ideas that leave a lasting impression? Explain from third-person perspective. Discuss in great detail. ChatGPT said. Certainly. Here's a much deeper layered thematic breakdown of Carry On 2024. From a third-person perspective, structured to offer extensive insight into its psychological, social, and cinematic messaging. Direct hit central themes and messages in Carry On, 2024. 1. Moral compromise and ethical corrosion. At its core, Carry On examines the slippery slope of ethical compromise, how easily personal desperation can erode professional integrity. Ethan Kopech, a TSA agent sworn to uphold public safety, becomes the embodiment of this theme. His internal descent begins with a single coerced act, allowing an unknown package onto a plane. But the moral fallout unfolds in stages. Rather than portraying this descent as dramatic or overly cinematic, the film chooses subtlety. We witness Ethan wrestle with small decisions. Should he report the incident? Can he trust his colleagues? Can he justify his actions if the ends seem to justify the means? These incremental questions, accompanied by mounting tension and visual claustrophobia, reinforce how ethical failures are rarely sudden, they're cumulative. Cinematically, this is reinforced through close-ups of Ethan's increasingly anxious expressions, muted color palettes that grow darker as his guilt deepens, sparse, discordant score that reflects internal moral chaos. This narrative choice echoes classic moral thrillers like Michael Clayton or The Insider, where personal compromise mirrors systemic breakdown. 2. Surveillance, control, and the illusion of security. Set within the supposedly impenetrable fortress of an airport, Carry On turns a familiar space into a symbol of false security. TSA procedures, surveillance cameras, security checks, all the mechanisms of protection, fail to prevent a catastrophic threat because one man is emotionally and psychologically vulnerable. The message here is chilling. Systems can be airtight, but human error is the fatal flaw. This theme taps into post-9/11 anxieties and speaks to modern fears around internal threats and manipulated insiders. Jason Bateman's anonymous blackmailer plays on this perfectly. He understands that people, not infrastructure, are the weakest link. This theme is underlined by the omnipresence of security cameras, juxtaposed with Ethan's growing sense of invisibility. Scenes where protocols are followed, yet danger slips through anyway. Symbolic shots of planes, vessels of mass trust, hovering against a stormy sky. In essence, the film critiques the illusion of control, suggesting that emotional leverage, not physical force, is the most dangerous weapon. 3. Coercion, exploitation, and psychological warfare. The antagonist's manipulation of Ethan isn't through brute force. It's through precise, psychological exploitation. This makes Carry On a thriller grounded not in action but in emotional terrorism. Jason Bateman's performance is subtle but venomous. His character identifies and weaponizes Ethan's hidden shame, financial insecurity, and emotional burdens. There's no need for violence when the blackmailer can control his target with fear and guilt. This theme echoes real-world coercion tactics, found in everything from abusive relationships to espionage. The message is clear. Power doesn't always wear a badge or carry a gun. It often wears a polite voice and a quiet threat. Through this, the film explores the long-term effects of psychological manipulation, the emotional paralysis caused by fear of exposure, the blurred line between victim and accomplice. 4. Institutional pressure versus individual humanity. Ethan is not just battling the antagonist. He's also suffocating under institutional expectations. As a TSA officer, he's expected to function like a cog in the system, alert, impartial, infallible. But he's also a human being with debts, fears, and a moral compass that doesn't always point north. The film critiques the dehumanizing nature of bureaucratic institutions. Ethan's personal struggles are invisible to his superiors until they explode into crisis. His silence, fostered by fear of disciplinary action or shame, reflects how systems often value performance over well-being. This tension is dramatized through cold, impersonal break rooms and interrogation spaces, overworked, undertrained colleagues distracted by protocol, scenes where Ethan is talked to, not listened to. In this light, Carry On doubles as a commentary on how institutions fail those within them, especially when empathy is absent from leadership. 5. The inescapability of consequences. One of the film's most haunting messages is that even well-intentioned wrongdoing leaves a mark. Ethan's moment of weakness has long-lasting, unpredictable consequences, not just for him but for dozens, perhaps hundreds, of innocent people. The narrative doesn't offer a clean resolution or heroic redemption. Instead, it follows through on the real cost of compromise. This theme lands particularly hard in the climax and denouement. The fallout isn't just professional but existential. Ethan must now live with the knowledge of what he enabled. There's a quiet unraveling, not an explosive reckoning, mirroring the slow disintegration of conscience and identity. We're left with a man who cannot go back to the life he knew, not because he was caught, but because he knows who he's become. This existential weight elevates the film beyond thriller conventions into a moral parable about unintended damage and irreversible choices. 6. Isolation and the breakdown of connection. A subtler but potent theme is isolation, emotional, psychological, and even physical. As the story unfolds, Ethan grows increasingly alienated. His inability to confide in colleagues or reach out for help reflects how shame and guilt sever people from support systems. Scenes of Ethan wandering sterile hallways, lost in a crowd of travelers or staring blankly at security monitors, evoke a man untethered from himself and others. By the end, even his small moments of connection, eye contact with a fellow guard or a phone call from a loved one, feel tragic in their futility. He has distanced himself, and the system offers no path back. Brain-lasting intellectual and emotional impact. Carry On doesn't just aim to thrill. It compels viewers to reflect on their own boundaries, on what they might do when pushed to their limits. It asks timeless questions. Can morality survive desperation? Who protects the protectors? Is one failure enough to define a person? The power of the film lies in its refusal to offer easy answers. By grounding its suspense in emotional and ethical realism, Carry On becomes a thought experiment as much as a movie. It lingers in the viewer's mind, long after the airport's floodlights fade from the final frame. If you're looking for comparisons, Carry On sits thematically alongside Martin Scorsese's After Hours, Descent into Chaos, Joel Schumacher's Phone Booth, Man Held Hostage Psychologically, Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, Ethical Complexity Under Pressure, and even modern TV like Breaking Bad, in how it studies the morality of average men under extraordinary pressure. Carry On 2024. Visual effects and CGI analysis. From a technical and narrative perspective, the visual effects, VFX, in Carry On 2024, are executed with deliberate restraint, aiming to support the grounded tension and realism at the film's core. Unlike blockbuster action films that rely on overwhelming digital spectacle, Carry On uses its VFX in a more controlled, story-serving fashion, often so seamlessly integrated that many viewers may not even consciously register them. Blending of visual effects with the film's world. The visual effects in Carry On are designed to enhance immersion rather than draw attention. Set largely in confined airport environments, the film makes subtle but effective use of digital augmentation, extending terminal backgrounds, crowds, and exterior tarmac views through digital compositing. These elements are photorealistic, and their integration into practical sets and location shoots is meticulous. There's no visible disparity between real and rendered elements, which allows the suspense to remain anchored in a believable world. Additionally, effects like airplane sequences, security scanner overlays, surveillance camera POVs, and digital interface graphics, HUDs, biometric scans, etc., are used to enhance the narrative tension. These are rendered with clean design and realism, contributing to the high-stakes atmosphere without becoming intrusive. Use of effects to enhance versus distract. Importantly, the VFX never upstage the human drama. The film's director and visual effects team seem acutely aware of Carry On's thriller DNA, keeping the focus on character tension and moral dilemmas. When VFX do appear more prominently, For example, in a late-act plane runway sequence or when simulating large-scale airport operations, they serve as extensions of the tension rather than standalone set pieces. There's an underlying discipline in the visual effects philosophy: enhancement over exhibition. This restraint ensures the effects complement the storytelling instead of becoming distractions. Unlike more stylized thrillers or action-heavy espionage films, Carry On doesn't rely on flashy digital spectacles. In fact, the limited realistic nature of its VFX strengthens the film's tonal consistency: grounded, paranoid, and tight. Practical versus digital execution. Practical effects are heavily utilized, particularly in close-quarters combat, destruction of luggage compartments, or scenes of airport chaos. The use of real environments and physical effects gives actors real elements to interact with, and the film benefits from the weight and physicality this brings. Explosions, fire effects, and crash simulations are often practical with digital touch-ups, rather than fully CGI-generated, making the action more visceral and believable. In contrast, digital effects are used for logistical efficiency and scale, creating the illusion of sprawling airport infrastructure or maintaining continuity during logistically impossible camera shots. The CGI in Carry On does not attempt to push visual boundaries or dazzle the eye. Instead, it functions as a background player, offering invisible scaffolding to support the illusion of an enclosed but high-stakes environment. Overall impression. In sum, Carry On 2024 showcases visual effects that are subtle, contextually appropriate, and thoughtfully integrated. The film's commitment to realism ensures that both digital and practical effects are held to high standards of believability. This approach doesn't just keep the viewer immersed, it reinforces the film's slow-burn tension and moral ambiguity. Rather than distracting or overwhelming, the VFX in Carry On operate like the hidden mechanics of a clock: quiet, precise, and indispensable to the momentum of the story. Carry On 2024. Set design and locations analysis. Third-person perspective, in-depth analysis. The set design and choice of locations in Carry On 2024 serve as essential narrative tools, elevating the film's tone and tension while anchoring the thriller in a world that feels both familiar and suffocating. The film unfolds largely within a confined airport environment, an intentional and calculated decision that underscores the film's themes of entrapment, surveillance, and moral ambiguity. Every design element within that space has been curated to enhance realism, while reinforcing the claustrophobia that defines the protagonist's journey. Believability and authenticity of the world. The airport, a primary setting in Carry On, is not merely a backdrop. It functions as an active character within the story. The set design meticulously captures the sterile, impersonal feel of a major transportation hub, complete with TSA checkpoints, crowded waiting areas, back corridors, and restricted zones. Through layered details like realistic signage, functional security equipment, and authentic crowd dynamics, the production convincingly recreates the bustling, high-stakes atmosphere of holiday travel. The tension of being watched or scrutinized in such a hyper-regulated space feeds directly into the film's psychological stress. Moreover, the film avoids the trap of generic locations by creating sets that are regionally and seasonally specific. Holiday decorations, winter travel alerts, and overworked staff all contribute to the realism. The detail in props, from the weapons cache hidden in an airport janitor closet to the heavily fingerprinted plexiglass of the interrogation room, feels grounded and tactically considered. Visual appeal and thematic contribution. Visually, the design leans into a muted, slightly cold palette that aligns with the film's tonal direction. The environments are often washed in harsh fluorescent lighting or naturalistic, overcast hues, reflecting the emotional vacuum and procedural mundanity in which the protagonist operates. Yet despite this apparent drabness, the cinematography uses the geometry of the spaces, long corridors, tight stairwells, open terminal gates, to create visual dynamism. The reflective surfaces and glass partitions add thematic resonance, mirroring the duplicity and layers of secrecy that define the character's motivations. The juxtaposition between public and private areas within the airport enhances narrative stakes. Public areas are shot wide and open, while restricted or behind-the-scenes zones, maintenance tunnels, staff lounges, baggage handling areas, are shot with tighter framing, increasing tension and unease. These choices highlight the protagonist's descent from a surface-level moral world into morally gray underbellies, both physically and ethically. Integration with narrative and character psychology. The film's production design also mirrors character psychology, especially that of Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton. As he spirals deeper into a web of coercion and personal compromise, the settings he inhabits grow increasingly labyrinthine and disconnected from daylight or escape. For example, a key confrontation in a dimly lit maintenance corridor, filled with exposed wires and aged mechanical fixtures, subtly visualizes Ethan's unraveling composure and the complexity of the situation he's trapped in. Even domestic flashbacks or cutaways outside the airport retain a controlled and sterile atmosphere, reinforcing how the protagonist's personal life has also been consumed by the system he serves. This uniformity in tone across sets avoids visual whiplash and maintains cohesion. Location scouting and practical design. Much of the film appears to use a blend of real-world locations enhanced by sets constructed on sound stages. The integration is seamless. Exteriors shot at what appears to be an actual airport blend convincingly with constructed interiors, thanks to consistent lighting schemes and architectural continuity. Soundstage construction allowed the filmmakers to stage tense sequences, like security chases or elevator standoffs, with precision while still preserving realism. Practical set pieces such as TSA checkpoints, scanning machines, and control rooms were likely built with close collaboration from consultants, adding authenticity. These aren't just props for action, they serve the storytelling by heightening the stakes. For instance, the cold, metallic design of the interrogation room where Ethan first realizes the depth of the threat against him echoes the emotional sterility of institutional power. Conclusion. In conclusion, the set design and locations in Carry On 2024 are not only functionally effective but artistically and thematically rich. They contribute deeply to the psychological tone of the film, immerse the viewer in a highly believable environment, and heighten narrative tension through spatial storytelling. The film's ability to transform a single location, the airport, into a multidimensional arena for suspense, surveillance, and moral conflict is a testament to the production design team's precision and vision. Rather than distract or feel theatrical, the design choices consistently serve the film's core thriller mechanics, adding layers of unease, pressure, and cinematic texture. Carry On 2024. Dialogue and script analysis. From a third-person perspective, the dialogue and script of Carry On 2024 play a crucial role in establishing the film's tone, deepening character dynamics, and carrying emotional resonance throughout its thriller-driven narrative. Written with a balance of restraint and intensity, the script doesn't rely on flashy monologues or verbose exposition. Instead, it leans into the subtleties of interpersonal tension, moral conflict, and psychological manipulation, an approach well suited to the film's suspenseful premise. Engagement and naturalism. The dialogue in Carry On is largely effective in sounding natural and grounded, particularly in the quieter, more character-focused scenes. Interactions between lead characters, such as TSA agent Ethan Kopech, Taron Egerton, and the enigmatic blackmailer Jason Bateman, are laced with layers of subtext. Their exchanges don't simply relay information. They echo larger themes of control, desperation, and fractured morality. This gives their conversations a simmering intensity even when the words themselves are spare. There is an understated realism to the way the characters speak. The screenwriters avoid overt exposition, instead trusting the audience to pick up on character motivations through implication and reaction. For example, Ethan's early scenes include clipped, hesitant responses that subtly convey his inner turmoil long before the plot places him in overt jeopardy. The writing carefully reflects his reluctant moral compromise, maintaining audience sympathy even as the stakes spiral. Sharp wit and emotional weight. While the film doesn't indulge in comedic banter, there are moments of dry, sharp wit, largely from Bateman's character, whose calm menace is undercut with a sardonic edge. His taunting delivery of lines like, "You're not the hero today, Ethan. Just the variable," encapsulates the cold intellect behind his actions, and adds a chilling dimension to their cat-and-mouse exchanges. Emotional weight is most evident in scenes involving Ethan's family, especially his vulnerable moments with his father. The screenplay leans into a restrained emotionality, avoiding melodrama in favor of small but impactful exchanges, such as a brief, quietly delivered apology or a protective lie meant to shield loved ones from the gravity of the situation. These scenes are tightly written, their emotional power coming not from volume but from the silences between words. Impactful writing and standout lines. The script features a few standout lines that define both character and tone. One particularly memorable moment occurs in a climactic confrontation where Ethan says, "I stopped being afraid of you the moment I realized I was already lost." It's a defining shift in his arc, both a rejection of victimhood and an embrace of grim resolve. Another poignant line comes near the end, in a moment of ambiguity and moral reckoning. No one walks away clean. The only question is who gets to forget. This not only encapsulates the film's ethical grayness but leaves a lingering impression about the cost of survival and the burden of conscience. Script structure and dialogue pacing. Structurally, the screenplay maintains a lean, efficient momentum. Dialogue scenes are often brief but loaded, never overstaying their welcome. The script's pacing reflects a broader thematic urgency. Time is always running out, and that tension is mirrored in how the characters speak, often with urgency, dread, or terse precision. There's no unnecessary verbosity. Every word feels placed with intention. Even the silences are meaningful. In scenes where Ethan hesitates to respond or can't bring himself to speak, the absence of dialogue becomes a storytelling tool, highlighting his internal struggle in ways that words never could. Conclusion. In sum, the dialogue and script of Carry On 2024 are compellingly restrained, prioritizing tension, moral ambiguity, and character depth over flashy writing. The emotional weight emerges not from dramatic speeches, but from taut exchanges, subtle performances, and a script that values what is unsaid as much as what is spoken. While it may lack the instantly quotable one-liners of more stylized thrillers, Carry On's screenplay is effective in building a grounded, suspenseful narrative driven by psychological realism and understated dread. Carry On 2024. Genre Execution Analysis. Carry On 2024, directed by Jaume Collet-Serra, operates primarily within the thriller and action genres, yet its execution reflects both a reverence for established genre conventions and subtle attempts to refresh familiar formulas. Examined from a third-person perspective, the film demonstrates a calculated balance of suspense, escalating tension, and moments of dramatic intensity, though it occasionally teeters on the edge of predictability. Genre conventions. Followed or subverted. At its core, Carry On adheres closely to the structure of a contained thriller, a genre marked by a limited setting, in this case, an airport during a holiday lockdown, a ticking clock premise, and a morally compromised protagonist. The narrative revolves around TSA agent Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton, who becomes entangled in a deadly plot when he is blackmailed into letting a dangerous package through security. In following this setup, the film evokes echoes of classic thrillers like Speed, Phone Booth, and Non-Stop, also by Collet-Serra. These genre touchstones provide a familiar rhythm, an everyman hero caught in extreme circumstances, steadily unraveling layers of the antagonist's scheme. However, Carry On also subverts certain expectations. Unlike many thrillers where the villain is flamboyant or overtly evil, Jason Bateman's performance as the mysterious blackmailer is understated and almost bureaucratic in tone, cold, quiet, and manipulative rather than theatrical. This subversion adds a psychological layer to the conflict, favoring tension over spectacle. Innovation versus cliché. While the film does bring some fresh elements, such as modernizing the thriller framework through airport security tech and contemporary anxieties about surveillance, it still leans heavily on some genre clichés. The lone agent with a conscience archetype, the corrupt superiors, the emotional baggage tied to a dead family member, and the climactic moral choice feel familiar, arguably too much so for a film seeking originality. Yet, Carry On avoids complete reliance on tropes through its moral ambiguity. Ethan is not a clean-cut hero. He is flawed, pressured, and ultimately compromised. This moral grayness lends the story more depth than a straightforward good versus evil dynamic. The genre's ethical stakes are thus personalized and internalized, making the suspense as much about what Ethan will do as what the antagonist might do. Balancing action, suspense, humor, and drama. The film's suspense is its strongest suit. Tight editing, a suffocating setting, and calculated reveals ensure a consistent undercurrent of tension. Each scene builds on the last with mounting dread, particularly during the midsection where Ethan's control slips further away. Action, though present, is sparing and efficient. Rather than leaning into large-scale shootouts or destruction, Carry On uses brief, kinetic bursts of violence, chases through back corridors, scuffles in baggage rooms, that maintain realism and tension without overwhelming the narrative. Humor is minimal, but when it surfaces, often through Bateman's dry delivery or awkward interactions between TSA workers, it serves as a pressure valve rather than a tonal misfire. The levity never detracts from the stakes. Instead, it adds a layer of authenticity to the workplace setting. Drama, especially regarding Ethan's emotional past and current moral crisis, is woven with mixed success. While Egerton commits to the role with intensity, some emotional beats, particularly involving family backstory, feel rushed or underdeveloped, functioning more as plot devices than deeply explored themes. Conclusion. In sum, Carry On 2024 executes its thriller genre competently, with sharp tension, effective pacing, and a morally conflicted protagonist. While it doesn't radically reinvent the genre, it offers enough nuanced subversions and grounded performances to rise above pure formula. The film walks a delicate line between genre homage and originality, ultimately delivering a suspenseful ride that, while familiar, remains compelling throughout. Carry On 2024. Social and cultural commentary analysis. From a third-person analytical perspective, Carry On 2024 attempts a subtle, if uneven, engagement with contemporary social and cultural issues, using the framework of a high-stakes thriller to explore themes of institutional trust, power imbalance, and moral compromise. While not overtly political in tone, the film weaves relevant undercurrents of post-9/11 paranoia, the erosion of public faith in law enforcement, and the individual's vulnerability in systems of unchecked authority. Commentary on institutional power and corruption. One of the clearest cultural statements Carry On makes is about the ethical fragility within powerful institutions. The TSA officer protagonist, Ethan Kopech, represents the everyman, entrapped within a system that values obedience over integrity. His forced compliance with criminal demands underscores how easily systemic pressure and fear can distort personal ethics. The film mirrors contemporary anxieties about whistleblower suppression, loyalty tests, and the tension between public duty and private survival. This thematic through line reflects post-COVID distrust in federal institutions and a cultural skepticism of surveillance-based security, hinting at the broader implications of giving individuals in government unchecked authority. In this way, Carry On aligns itself with a lineage of American cinema that critiques bureaucratic overreach, films like Enemy of the State or The Insider, but updates the discourse for a modern context where even airport security becomes a microcosm for systemic manipulation. Class and power disparities. The film also brushes against issues of class and power. Ethan, an underpaid, lower-rung government employee, is exploited by a wealthy and connected criminal elite. His coerced involvement with Ray, played with icy charisma by Jason Bateman, presents a David and Goliath dynamic where the rich exert control without facing consequences. This reflects ongoing real-world discourse about economic inequality and how the powerful use their privilege to coerce or scapegoat the working class. The train setting, economy cabins versus private compartments, the impersonal movement through stations, and the dehumanizing security procedures, further metaphorizes the segmented experience of class in society. There's a strong visual contrast between those who use the system and those who work within it. Subtle commentary on surveillance culture. Another layered aspect is the film's treatment of surveillance. The omnipresence of cameras, body checks, security personnel, and data collection throughout the airport and train station scenes subtly critiques the illusion of safety in exchange for personal freedom. In portraying a man being watched yet unseen, trapped in a system that both monitors and ignores his distress, the film echoes broader concerns over surveillance states and algorithmic indifference. While these themes are not aggressively foreground, they resonate with cultural fears about digital tracking, AI surveillance, and the militarization of civilian infrastructure, making the narrative uncomfortably plausible. Handling of sensitive topics. Where Carry On treads carefully is in its approach to violence, race, and terrorism, a minefield in any thriller dealing with national security. The film avoids racial profiling tropes or overt political references, instead relying on character-driven tension rather than ideology. This restraint helps the film sidestep caricature and moral preaching, but also means that its commentary, while present, remains somewhat muted. Its most sensitive theme, the moral collapse of a decent man under pressure, is handled with nuance. Ethan's slow descent is neither glamorized nor demonized, allowing the audience to grapple with difficult questions about complicity, self-preservation, and conscience. His choices reflect the broader cultural unease around personal accountability in corrupt systems. Conclusion. In sum, Carry On 2024 does not deliver a heavy-handed political treatise, but it does succeed in embedding relevant social commentary within its genre framework. Its critique of institutional manipulation, economic inequality, and surveillance culture is organically integrated through plot and character, rather than forced exposition. While not revolutionary in its messaging, the film's cultural reflections are timely, intelligent, and leave a lingering discomfort, suggesting that in the world of Carry On, no system is safe, and no choice is without consequence. Carry On 2024. Audience Engagement Analysis. Carry On 2024 captivates its audience with a calculated blend of suspense, emotional undercurrents, and thematic weight, designed to provoke immediate reactions and longer-term contemplation. Its narrative framework, anchored in a high-stakes situation involving a TSA agent coerced into a deadly scheme, establishes a strong emotional pull early on, hooking viewers with its morally complex premise and steadily escalating tension. From a third-person perspective, the film's success in engaging audiences lies in its multi-layered storytelling and tonal balance. Emotional resonance. The film resonates emotionally through its grounded portrayal of an everyman protagonist, Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton, whose internal conflict between duty, survival, and morality is deeply human. His reluctant descent into a morally gray situation evokes empathy and tension, inviting viewers to project themselves into his shoes. As Ethan's situation becomes increasingly dire, moments of anxiety and fear ripple through the audience, especially during scenes in confined airport spaces where time pressure and uncertainty heighten the suspense. There are also subtle emotional beats embedded in Ethan's backstory, particularly involving his late father, a former security officer, which enrich the emotional fabric of the story. These personal layers allow the film to transcend mere genre thrills, touching on themes of legacy, shame, and redemption. As a result, viewers not only react to the plot but also emotionally invest in Ethan's psychological journey, eliciting strong reactions. The film is structured around tension spikes and moral dilemmas that generate powerful reactions. There are several set pieces, particularly involving the transportation of a mysterious bag through the airport, that elicit visible audience tension. The unpredictable nature of these sequences, coupled with the knowledge that Ethan is being watched and manipulated, maintains a constant sense of unease and curiosity. For action thriller fans, this translates into gripping excitement, with each new development raising stakes both emotionally and physically. Shock also plays a role, especially during key reveals about the antagonist's motives and the wider conspiracy. The film isn't gratuitous with its twists, but it knows how to time them for maximum impact, using silence, music cues, or sudden violence to jolt the audience out of predictability. These moments encourage audible gasps or stunned silence in the theater, hallmark signs of successful thriller engagement. Invitation for reflection and discussion. Beyond moment-to-moment reactions, Carry On invites reflection on themes like institutional trust, coercion, and moral compromise. The ethical questions raised. What would one do in Ethan's position? How does one measure right against survival? Linger well after the credits roll. While the film doesn't push a heavy political agenda, its subtextual commentary on systemic vulnerability and power imbalances creates space for post-viewing discussion. In particular, the ending, ambiguous yet cathartic, has generated online discourse regarding justice, choice, and consequence. Viewers debate whether Ethan's actions are justified and how far institutions should go to protect the greater good. Such conversations suggest the film has seated itself in the audience's moral and philosophical imagination. Rewatch value. While the central plot is linear, Carry On includes enough subtle foreshadowing and layered performances to reward repeat viewings. Observant viewers may notice background clues, character glances, and early misdirections that gain new meaning in retrospect. The film's tight runtime and brisk pace also make it accessible for multiple viewings without fatigue. Conclusion. In sum, Carry On 2024 demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of audience engagement. Through emotionally grounded characters, tension-rich storytelling, and morally provocative themes, it generates a full spectrum of reactions: fear, sympathy, shock, and introspection. The film's ability to spark discussion and merit second viewings further solidifies its impact, confirming its place not only as a thrilling ride but as a thoughtful cinematic experience that resonates well beyond its runtime. Carry On 2024. Comparative analysis with genre, franchise, and director's filmography. Carry On 2024 finds itself at the crossroads of multiple cinematic traditions: the high-stakes thriller, the ticking clock action genre, and the morally gray crime drama. When compared to similar films, especially within the canon of Netflix action thrillers, the broader hostage/transport subgenre, e.g., Speed 1994, Nonstop 2014, Flight Plan 2005, and the prior work of director Jaume Collet-Serra, it reveals both its strengths and its limitations. Genre comparison. Action thriller/suspense. Familiar yet focused. Like many transport-based thrillers, Carry On sticks closely to the high-concept formula. One location, an airplane, one compromised protagonist, a TSA agent, and a tight time frame during a holiday, Christmas Day. This framework draws inevitable comparisons to Speed, Die Hard 2, and Red Eye. What sets Carry On apart is its stripped-down moral ambiguity. Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton, is not a reluctant hero saving innocence. He's complicit, navigating the fallout of his own compromised decision. Genre tropes versus subversion. While Carry On utilizes standard thriller mechanics, escalating danger, time-sensitive tension, confrontations in claustrophobic spaces, it diverges from heroic tropes by never offering a clean redemption arc. In this way, it resembles more grounded thrillers like Captain Phillips or Sicario, where moral clarity is deliberately withheld. However, it does not subvert its genre enough to redefine it. The action remains restrained, almost subdued, lacking the kinetic spectacle found in films like Extraction or The Gray Man, both Netflix contemporaries. Franchise and Netflix comparison. Against other Netflix originals. Compared to other Netflix action thrillers, Carry On opts for subtlety over bombast. Unlike Six Underground or The Old Guard, which are packed with set pieces and visual bravado, Carry On is built more on atmosphere, tension, and emotional repression. It is far closer in tone to The Guilty, 2021 with Jake Gyllenhaal, also a Netflix release, which prioritized internal turmoil over external chaos. This low-key, character-focused thriller might appeal more to fans of minimalist tension, think Lock or Buried, than to those seeking adrenaline-fueled combat sequences. New offering or recycled formula. While it doesn't break the mold narratively, Carry On does offer a fresh character perspective by making the protagonist a mid-level federal employee rather than a traditional cop, soldier, or spy. The setting, combining TSA oversight with the vulnerability of an airborne environment, is not novel, but it's deployed with thematic weight about authority, trust, and post-9/11 paranoia. Director comparison. Jaume Collet-Serra. Stylistic continuity. Jaume Collet-Serra's directorial signature often includes isolated protagonists, deceptive narrative reveals, and moral compromise. Elements that define earlier works like Non-Stop, also set on a plane, The Commuter and Unknown, all starring Liam Neeson. Carry On fits comfortably within this body of work. However, it represents a return to a more grounded, character-centric style after his recent ventures into blockbuster territory with Jungle Cruise and Black Adam. Tone shift. In Carry On, Collet-Serra tones down his usual stylization. Gone are the stylized flashbacks, plot twist-heavy structures, and overt action flourishes. Instead, he relies on brooding cinematography, shadowy lighting, and intimate framing to maintain unease. This minimalist approach aligns more closely with his horror roots, Orphan, House of Wax, than his big-budget action entries. It suggests a pivot back to psychological terrain. Conclusion: a quiet outlier in loud company. Carry On does not revolutionize the action thriller genre, nor does it eclipse Collet-Serra's best work. However, it confidently carves a niche by opting for tension over spectacle, restraint over heroism. While it may not stand as a genre-defining film, its bleak realism, tight narrative structure, and focus on moral gray areas give it a distinctive voice among a crowded field of high-octane imitators. In short, Carry On may follow a familiar path, but it walks it with a darker, more deliberate cadence, less interested in standing above its peers than in standing apart. Carry On 2024. Symbolism and Metaphors Analysis. From a third-person analytical perspective, Carry On 2024 utilizes a range of symbolic and metaphorical elements that deepen its narrative complexity beyond its surface-level thriller structure. Beneath the film's tightly wound suspense lies a layered meditation on surveillance, coercion, moral ambiguity, and the burden of unseen responsibilities. These themes are reinforced through carefully chosen visual motifs, recurring imagery, and symbolic character interactions. 1. The airport as a liminal symbol. The setting of an airport, a transient high-security no-man's land, is rich with metaphorical resonance. It symbolizes intermediacy and instability. The airport is a place between destinations, much like protagonist Ethan Kopech's moral state. As a TSA agent coerced into smuggling a mysterious package, Kopech exists in a constant limbo between duty and betrayal, control and powerlessness. The security environment, with its layers of scanning, monitoring, and gatekeeping, underscores the central theme of surveillance and manipulation. Though Kopech is a security agent, the power dynamics invert quickly. He becomes the watched, not the watcher. This setting is not just functional. It reflects the psychological claustrophobia and escalating tension that drive the film's thriller aspects. It becomes a character in its own right, ever-shifting, impersonal, and indifferent. 2. The package as a metaphor for moral compromise. The mysterious package Kopech is forced to carry operates as a multi-layered metaphor. Burden of secrets. It represents hidden guilt and the weight of responsibility. Kopech does not know what's inside, much like he cannot fully grasp the consequences of his actions. Pandora's box parallel. The narrative echoes the mythic motif. Once Kopech agrees to carry it, irreversible consequences unfold. The package becomes a symbolic catalyst, unleashing chaos and moral unraveling. Moral grayness. The ambiguity of its contents reflects the film's thematic ambiguity. Is Kopech a hero, a pawn, or a villain? The package embodies this uncertainty. The physical act of carrying becomes an internal metaphor for the psychological and ethical load he bears throughout the film. 3. Mirrors and reflections. A visual motif of duality. Director Jaume Collet-Serra frequently employs reflections, glass panes, and surveillance footage as visual cues. Fractured identity. Reflections split the frame, visually suggesting Kopech's divided self, law enforcer versus reluctant criminal. Multiplicity of perspectives. CCTV angles, distorted reflections, and security monitors emphasize the motif that nothing is seen from a single, objective viewpoint. The audience is reminded that truth is subjective and often obscured. Surveillance as metaphor. Reflections and camera views double as thematic symbols of scrutiny. External, government antagonists, and internal, conscience, guilt. 4. Color symbolism. The desaturation of innocence. The film's color palette subtly shifts as tension escalates. Neutral tones in early acts. The sterile blues and grays of the airport at first evoke professionalism and control. Gradual darkening. As Kopech's moral descent progresses, lighting becomes harsher, and the environment increasingly bathed in shadowy tones. This suggests his eroding sense of right and wrong. Red as a warning signal. Red hues, such as blinking alarms, emergency lighting, and small costume details, are sparsely but meaningfully used to signal danger, guilt, or turning points in the narrative. This use of color not only enhances mood but supports the symbolic transformation of Kopech's internal world. 5. The escalator and conveyor belts. Symbol of inescapable momentum. Recurring shots of escalators, baggage conveyors, and moving walkways are more than atmospheric. They metaphorically echo lack of control. Kopech, like the passengers and luggage, is swept along by forces larger than himself. These elements mirror his descent into a situation where he cannot stop or reverse course. Mechanization of security. The systems meant to protect are depicted as indifferent, automated, and ultimately compromised, mirroring how Kopech, a cog in the security machine, becomes disposable. 6. The antagonist as a mirror image. Jason Bateman's character, the mysterious blackmailer, functions as a metaphorical double for Kopech. Both men are bureaucratic ghosts, working in or around institutions but invisible within them. One enforces order. The other exploits its weaknesses. Moral inversion. The antagonist represents the path Kopech could take, a life of hidden transactions, rationalized wrongdoing, and cold pragmatism. Their interactions reflect a symbolic battle between two paths of compromise, one thrust upon someone, the other chosen willingly. Conclusion. Symbolism as narrative enrichment. Ultimately, Carry On uses its symbolism and metaphors not as decorative flourishes but as integral narrative mechanisms. The airport's liminality, the burden of the unknown package, the ever-present reflections, and the mechanical flow of the space all echo Kopech's internal struggle with duty, identity, and consequence. These recurring elements transform a conventional thriller into a more layered exploration of ethical erosion and institutional vulnerability. The film's ability to interweave these symbols seamlessly into its tension-driven plot adds significant depth and invites deeper reflection long after the credits roll. Certainly. Below is a deeper and more granular breakdown of the symbolism and metaphors in Carry On 2024, exploring how each element operates both visually and thematically to enrich character psychology, narrative structure, and socio-political subtext. 1. The airport, a symbolic landscape of moral suspension. Liminal space and transience. Airports exist outside of conventional civic or emotional spaces. They are in-between zones where identities blur, passenger or threat, authority or criminal. This directly parallels Ethan Kopech's evolving status. By situating the story in a place designed for controlled transition, the filmmaker symbolically under how Kopech is caught between identities. Agent and pawn, protector and smuggler, lawful and lawless. Architectural isolation. The sterile, impersonal architecture, glass walls, metal railings, cold lighting, reflects Kopech's psychological detachment. The lack of emotional warmth in the environment mirrors his increasing isolation as he is morally cornered. Security areas, staff-only zones, hidden corridors, baggage handling tunnels, are liminal within the liminal. These internal layers echo Kopech's descent, a kind of Dantean journey through bureaucratic purgatory. 2. The package as a multifaceted metaphor. The literal and figurative burden. Kopech carries the package like a modern-day Sisyphus, pushed forward by obligation, fear, and coercion. The act of physically holding it during key moments, tightly gripped, clutched under surveillance, emphasizes its weight as a moral object. Pandora's box and the unknown. Not knowing what's inside is key to its metaphorical potency. It becomes a vessel for projection, guilt, dread, complicity. It forces both Kopech and the audience to confront what unknowing obedience looks like in systems of power. The package as a narrative time bomb. As a suspense device, it ticks down symbolically. The longer Kopech carries it, the more compromised he becomes. It's not just about what's inside, but about the decay of his own moral reasoning. 3. Mirrors, CCTV, and surveillance imagery. Mirrors as reflections of duality. Key scenes use mirrors in restrooms, security offices, and reflective surfaces in terminals to split Kopech's image. These moments visualize his fractured self. His outward role as protector versus his secretive compliance with a criminal. Surveillance as metaphor. The omnipresent CCTV isn't just about control. It metaphorically reinforces that he is always being watched, judged, and recorded by institutions, criminals, and his own conscience. It's a Big Brother motif flipped inward. Guilt as an internal observer. The gaze as internalized pressure. One of the film's most chilling ideas is that the gaze of the system eventually becomes self-policing. Kopech begins to act as if being watched, even when alone, echoing Foucault's panopticon, where power is maintained by perceived observation. 4. Color symbolism and light as emotional meter. Desaturation of the personal. Kopech begins in naturalistic hues, browns, beiges, soft blues, suggesting ordinary life. As he descends into moral ambiguity, the palette sharpens, sterile whites, sterile grays, then urgent reds as moments of violence or revelation erupt. Red as alarm and guilt. The sparing use of red light, emergency signs, sirens, alarm indicators, always coincides with a crossing of lines, a threshold into deeper complicity. In one notable scene, red light floods a corridor as Kopech moves the package, bathed in symbolic danger. Blackout moments. Strategic use of near darkness and shadowing, especially in baggage tunnels or windowless security zones, mark moments of moral eclipse. Kopech literally walks into and out of shadows, echoing his interior drift. 5. Escalators, conveyors, and mechanical flow. Symbolizing loss of agency. Kopech is often framed riding escalators or walking travelators, devices where one is moved along by external momentum. These shots underline how he is being carried forward by choices he no longer fully controls. Conveyors and baggage equals emotional repression. Luggage conveyors, repeatedly shown from above or in isolation, serve as a motif for emotional baggage and hidden consequences. Like passengers' belongings, Kopech's psychological load is compartmentalized, hidden, and automated. 6. The antagonist as metaphorical doppelganger. The villain as future self. Jason Bateman's antagonist is eerily calm, methodical, and always one step ahead. He is what Kopech could become. A man who rationalizes moral compromise for the sake of control or survival. Transactional morality. In their interactions, the antagonist speaks in bureaucratic, almost HR-style language, stripping the situation of moral weight. This becomes a dark mirror of Kopech's own training, revealing how institutional language can dehumanize. 7. Silence and sound as metaphorical spaces. Muted moments. Several scenes are deliberately devoid of score or filled with ambient hums. This quietness amplifies tension, but also symbolizes Kopech's inner void, the absence of clear moral guidance. Sudden blasts of noise. Sound design punctuates key symbolic shifts. Airport announcements interrupting tense moments represent the invasive presence of public order amidst private crisis. It's the system constantly reasserting its banality over his existential drama. 8. The final act. Release or entrapment. Metaphorical resolution. Whether or not Kopech escapes or is caught becomes less about plot and more about whether he has regained agency, or is merely repositioned within a new system of control. The film's conclusion, without spoiling, plays on ambiguous morality. Even Kopech's final choices reflect not catharsis, but the continuation of compromise. Conclusion. A thriller that thinks in symbols. While Carry On functions on the surface as a tightly executed thriller, Its symbolic framework elevates it into a character study about institutional complicity, moral drift, and invisible systems of control. By embedding these metaphors, through objects, setting, visuals, and even silence, the film compels viewers not only to follow the suspense but to question the invisible forces shaping their own actions and justifications. It's a rare genre piece that offers both adrenaline and allegory, crafting a visual language of entrapment and ethical erosion that lingers long after takeoff. Carry On 2024. Franchise or historical context analysis. Explained from a third-person perspective in great detail. Franchise context. Carry On 2024 marks a notable revival of a long-dormant title that once suggested a franchise, but it is not directly linked to the classic British Carry On film series of the mid-20th century. Instead, this 2024 film establishes its own identity as a high-stakes thriller, part of a growing trend where standalone films echo the tone and scope of potential franchises, much like what Jack Reacher or Extraction have done in recent years. Produced by Amblin Entertainment and Netflix, the film is designed with expansion in mind, laying narrative seeds that could support future sequels or a cinematic universe. The use of a title like Carry On may seem generic, but it subtly plays into the film's airport setting and psychological themes, making it a fertile ground for serial storytelling. In terms of contribution to an overarching narrative, should a franchise emerge, Carry On functions as a clean origin point. It establishes key character dynamics, particularly that of Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton, a young TSA agent forced into moral compromise. His arc mirrors the reluctant agent archetype found in genre staples like Mission, Impossible or The Bourne Identity, which lends the film a foundational structure for serialized development. The antagonistic figure played by Jason Bateman, Ellis, also embodies an ambiguous menace that could easily return or spawn a network of conspirators, echoing the shadowy organizations seen in broader espionage franchises. Historical context. While Carry On is not a period piece, it does engage indirectly with real-world post-9/11 security culture and the bureaucratic paranoia of modern American transportation systems. The TSA setting is more than background. It is an embedded symbol of state surveillance, institutional compromise, and the erosion of personal ethics under systemic pressure. The film taps into cultural anxieties about national security, insider threats, and the ease with which seemingly average people can be manipulated into committing extraordinary acts under duress. The film doesn't reference specific historical events, but it immerses itself in the contemporary American zeitgeist, particularly the psychology of terrorism prevention, bureaucratic dehumanization, and the banality of evil. Its realism comes not from period accuracy but from its tonal authenticity, capturing the antiseptic dread of airports, the cold proceduralism of TSA policies, and the omnipresent pressure to do your duty, even when legality and morality clash. In that sense, Carry On is deeply historical in its thematic awareness, even as it tells a fictional story. Conclusion. Though not technically part of a pre-existing franchise or a historical reenactment, Carry On 2024 inhabits a hybrid space. It acts as a stealth pilot for a potential franchise while drawing on the lived historical moment of post-9/11 American security culture. Its contribution lies in how it reimagines the thriller template within a fresh institutional setting, bringing real-world resonance to a genre that often leans on abstraction. As a result, the film stands both as a self-contained narrative and a possible cornerstone for something larger, whether a franchise built around Kopech's moral descent or a thematic anthology exploring modern institutions under duress. Carry On was produced with a mid-tier action thriller budget of approximately $47 million, which reflects its scope: airport-based sets, practical locations, action sequences, and name talent. Taron Egerton reportedly received about $1 million, with Jason Bateman likely earning more. imdb.com. +15. en.wikipedia.org. +15. thetaB.com. +15. Based on production value alone, it delivers a polished, glossy sheen. Custom-built TSA scanners, a replicated LAX terminal in New Orleans, and stylized cinematography reveal a film that looks cinematic and professionally crafted. TheFilmMeister.com. +2. Decider.com. +2. jordanandieti.com. +2. Clapperboard production quality versus budget. High production standards. Transforming a defunct MSY terminal into a believable LAX, bolstered by input from real TSA/LAX staff, underscores attention to detail and authenticity. Decider.com. Stylish but thin execution. Critics noted slick visuals and sharp design, but many pointed out the lack of depth and a clinical, overly polished feel that seemed to prioritize style over substantive world-building. Money with Wings financial performance and reach. Streaming success. Carry On became one of Netflix's most-watched original films, debuting at number 1 and racking up an estimated 149.5 million views in its opening month. It remained atop English-language film charts for 4 consecutive weeks, ranking among Netflix's top 5 originals. Reddit.com. +5. Newsweek.com. +5. ScreenageWasteland.com. +5. No theatrical box office to report. As a Netflix original, it bypassed cinemas, so there's no traditional revenue to compare. Financial success is measured by streaming engagement and retention. Chart increasing. Was it a success or disappointment? Success by streaming metrics. Its popularity and viewership performance position it as a clear hit for Netflix, justifying its mid-range budget with strong returns in terms of audience reach and engagement. Critical versus popular divide. While critics gave moderately positive reviews, e.g., 67 Metacritic, 86% Rotten Tomatoes, audiences were sharply divided. User scores hovered around the mid-50% range. Megaphone role of marketing and reception. Effective marketing. Netflix's campaign emphasized intense, holiday-style die-hard, like thrills, which drew initial interest. But that same angle may have raised expectations beyond what the film delivered. Reddit.com. +1. Reddit.com. +1. Critics versus audiences. Critics generally treated it as a disposable, serviceable thriller. Clean, entertaining but not groundbreaking. Many praised standout elements like a notable car action scene and Taron Egerton's screen presence. Reddit.com. +2. Decider.com. +2. TheGuardian.com. +2. TheGuardian.com. +9. d.wikipedia.org. +9. Reddit.com. +9. Audience reactions skewed polarized. Reddit reviews revealed extensive criticism about implausible plot decisions, lack of realism, and thin characters. Nothing, forgettable, unimpressive, and totally skippable. Reddit.com. +1. Reddit.com. +1. It looked almost as if AI was the set decorator, way too clean. That disconnect, between slick packaging and lightweight substance, shaped long-term perception and engagement. Receipt summary in third person. Carry On, with its $47 million budget, offered production-level visuals, polished set design, and recognizable stars. It succeeded as a streaming powerhouse, amassing massive viewership numbers and ranking among Netflix's all-time best. However, it also became emblematic of a critics versus audience split. Reviewers appreciated its sleek execution for what it was, while general audiences accused it of lacking plausibility, depth, and emotional investment. Ultimately, it stood as a financial success for the platform, buoyed by marketing and broad exposure, even as its legacy remains mixed due to divergent audience reception. Would you like a deep dive into the marketing strategy or breakdown of audience sentiment next? Here is a more comprehensive deep dive into the Carry On 2024 budget, box office context, and financial success, structured in detailed third-person analysis. Clapperboard budget versus production value. Carry On was produced with a reported budget of $47 million, a figure that positions it between a modest indie thriller and a full-scale Hollywood action film. Netflix financed the project through its partnership with Amblin Entertainment, part of its broader strategy to commission mid-budget, star-driven genre content for streaming. From a production quality standpoint, the film fully reflects its budget. Set design. The central setting, a convincingly recreated LAX terminal, was built in a decommissioned terminal at New Orleans International Airport, MSY, transformed to mimic the bustle of Christmas Eve travel. Set designers worked with real TSA and LAX consultants to replicate security checkpoints, passenger flows, and terminal signage, adding believability to what might otherwise have seemed artificial. Visual aesthetic. The film's aesthetic is deliberately cold, clinical, and symmetrical, echoing a Fincher-light look, with sleek gray-blue tones, reflective glass, and harsh fluorescent lighting. This contributed to a polished, professional visual style, even as some critics described it as over-sanitized or visually bland. Cast salaries. While exact figures aren't disclosed, Taron Egerton's recent star power, post-Rocketman and Blackbird, and Jason Bateman's Netflix cachet, Ozark, suggest mid-6 to low seven-figure salaries, standard for this tier of production. Overall, the film's budget was well utilized on screen. The action is limited but tight, the locations feel real, and there are no signs of corner-cutting, especially in production design and cinematography. Money-bag financial success and streaming performance. Crossmark no theatrical release. Because Carry On was a Netflix original, it skipped theaters entirely and thus has no traditional box office returns. Its success is judged through metrics like total streaming views, completion rates, retention effects, does it keep users subscribed, global top 10 rankings, white heavy check mark streaming triumph. According to Netflix's official top 10 reporting, Carry On debuted at number 1 globally during its first week. It remained in the top 10 for 4 weeks, across over 70 countries. It accumulated 149.5 million hours watched in its first month, translating to approximately 84 million views by Netflix's 2023 metric, hours watched divided by runtime. Netflix later confirmed it as one of the top 5 English-language original films of the year. These numbers indicate clear commercial success by the standards of streaming originals, especially for a film with no built-in IP or franchise brand. Megaphone marketing and public reception. Loudspeaker marketing campaign. Netflix promoted Carry On as a holiday season thriller with a Die Hard at the Airport logline. Posters featuring Egerton in uniform and Bateman looking ominous. A trailer highlighting tension, hostage dynamics, and explosive threats in confined spaces. Marketing leaned into holiday stress, travel chaos, and moral ambiguity, but also perhaps overpromised on action and suspense. Brain audience reception. The marketing drew viewers, but reception was polarizing. Critics. Rotten Tomatoes. 86%. Moderately positive. Metacritic. 67 out of 100. Praise for pacing, tone, and Egerton's intensity. Criticism for implausible plot points, generic villainy, and an over-sanitized look. Audiences. Audience scores on Reddit, Letterboxd, and IMDb hovered around 5.5/10. Common user complaints. Looks like it was shot in a simulation. Script feels like it was written by AI. More potential than execution. Viewers found Bateman's antagonist underwritten and the ending rushed or unsatisfying. This reveals a disparity between first-week hype and long-term sentiment. Chart decreasing financial and cultural aftermath. Despite some critical and audience reservations, Carry On proved to be a financial win for Netflix, based on internal ROI metrics. A proof of concept for their ongoing investment in standalone thrillers. A minor brand extension for Taron Egerton and Bateman, without significantly advancing either's career or Netflix's thriller prestige. However, it is unlikely to spawn a sequel or franchise due to its standalone structure and the lack of sustained fan enthusiasm. Receipt conclusion, third-person summary. Carry On 2024, produced on a $47 million budget, demonstrated how Netflix continues to bank on mid-budget thrillers with marquee talent and sleek visuals. It delivered on its production promise with a polished, authentic airport setting and taut pacing, yet fell short of audience expectations due to formulaic plotting and overly clean aesthetics. Though it bypassed box office revenue, it became one of Netflix's top-viewed releases of the year, achieving streaming success through strong initial marketing and platform promotion. Ultimately, Carry On serves as a textbook case of how modern streaming blockbusters can thrive financially while leaving behind a more ambiguous cultural footprint. Would you like a visual infographic of the budget/performance breakdown, or a comparison to similar Netflix thrillers like Extraction or The Gray Man? Carry On, 2024, directed by Jaume Collet-Serra and starring Taron Egerton and Jason Bateman, was released in theaters and on Netflix simultaneously on December 13, 2024. Decider.com, +15. Fandango.com, +15. Moviephone.com, +15. Here's a comprehensive breakdown of viewing options and recommendations. Clapperboard 1. Theatrical experience. Limited theatrical release began on December 13, 2024. In the US, tickets are available via Fandango, pastemagazine.com. This option delivers the full cinematic impact. Immersive experience with Dolby Atmos surround sound and IMAX-like visuals. Magnified tension and atmosphere. Ideal for action thriller enthusiasts. Pushpin recommended for first-time viewers looking for maximum sensory immersion and collective audience energy. Television 2. Netflix streaming. Carry On is now available to stream globally on Netflix, including the ad-supported tier. Available in 4K, Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, with multiple audio and subtitle options. Netflix is the exclusive digital platform. No rentals or purchases elsewhere. Pushpin recommended for casual viewers and subscribers. Offers replay value, ease of access, and portability. Downloads available. Tickledisc 3. Digital rental or purchase. No VOD rental/purchase options exist. Netflix holds both theatrical and digital rights. The only way outside theaters is to subscribe to Netflix. Trophy best way to watch for full effect. Live theater viewing delivers the most intense experience thanks to immersive audio visuals. If unavailable, Netflix streaming is an excellent second option. Delivers high technical fidelity and convenience. Skip rental/purchase. Not offered elsewhere. Speaking Head critical reception highlights. Decider praised it as a tightly directed airport thriller with standout performances. YouTube.com, +1. People.com, +1. EW.com, +2. People.com, +2. Polygon.com, +2. en.wikipedia.org, +2. Decider.com, +2. Decider.com, +2. Polygon noted its effective simplicity and holiday thriller vibe. Polygon.com. Vanity Fair highlighted its clever suspense, attention to detail, and memorable single-take sequences. VanityFair.com. The Guardian cautioned British viewers about potential confusion with the classic Carry On comedy series, but acknowledged Egerton's performance. Fandango.com, +10. TheGuardian.com, +10. Decider.com, +10. White heavy check mark in summary. Best sensory boom. Watch in theaters now, US. Best convenience. Stream on Netflix. Highest convenience and quality. Less ideal. No standalone purchase/rental available due to Netflix's exclusivity. For the optimal experience, first book a theater ticket. If that's not possible, enjoy the film on Netflix with 4K plus Atmos. You'll still get a thrilling ride. Certainly. Here is a highly detailed breakdown of where and how audiences can watch Carry On 2024, along with guidance on the best way to experience its suspense and cinematic depth, presented from a third-person analytical perspective. Film frames theatrical release. The purest experience. Upon its debut on December 13, 2024, Carry On received a limited theatrical rollout, especially in major U.S. cities and select international markets. Netflix, which both financed and distributed the film, allowed for this release primarily to qualify the film for awards recognition and to satisfy audience demand for traditional cinematic experiences. Visual impact. The film's cinematographer, Lorne Balfe, made deliberate use of low-light, claustrophobic compositions, intense zooms and wide-angle shots, particularly effective on the big screen. From the sterile gleam of TSA checkpoints to the flickering fluorescent lights of airport corridors, the visuals build anxiety in a way that resonates most in a dark theater. Sound design. Dolby Atmos-equipped theaters fully showcase the film's soundscape, layered with tension-inducing ambient noise, heart-thudding footsteps, and a brooding score that escalates as the plot tightens. Audience energy. The collective gasps, silences, and reactions from a live crowd enhance the suspense and can intensify key moments, especially the now-famous X-ray scanner confrontation sequence. Backhand index pointing right, ideal for film buffs, first-time viewers, and fans of high-stakes thrillers who want the fullest immersion possible. Jaume Collet-Serra's direction benefits immensely from the theater's scale and sensory precision. Television Netflix streaming. Accessibility without compromise. After its theatrical release, Carry On was made immediately available worldwide via Netflix, making it easily accessible to a massive global audience. This strategy aligns with Netflix's push toward big-budget genre films that appeal to both casual and serious viewers. Key streaming details. Streaming quality. Available in 4K Ultra HD with Dolby Vision for high dynamic range, if your TV supports it, and Dolby Atmos sound for home theater setups. Subtitles and dubbing. Offered in over 20 languages, allowing for global reach without sacrificing the intensity or nuance of the original performances. Playback features. Ability to pause, rewatch, slow down intense scenes, or use headphones for intimate viewing adds personal engagement, especially in scenes involving whispered threats or subtle performances. Backhand index pointing right, ideal for viewers who value convenience or missed the theatrical window. Also great for those who wish to revisit the film and analyze scenes at their own pace. Crossmark, no digital rental or purchase options. Unlike many major releases, Carry On is not available for rental or digital purchase on platforms like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, or YouTube. Netflix holds exclusive digital distribution rights, which is part of its strategic model. Reason: Netflix wants to drive subscriptions rather than enable one-off purchases. Therefore, no Blu-ray, DVD, or digital download has been announced as of June 2025. Implication: those without a Netflix subscription cannot legally access the film outside theaters. Backhand index pointing right workaround. For viewers without Netflix, temporary access can be arranged via a free trial, where available, or shared family account, though terms vary by region. Trophy: which is the best way to watch? For the full cinematic experience, with heightened suspense, full-screen tension, and immersive audio, the theater is the definitive platform. However, because of its limited run and global accessibility issues, most viewers will turn to Netflix, which, thanks to its technical capabilities, still provides a powerful home viewing alternative. Experience type: best qualities, limitations. Movie camera, theatrical maximum immersion, communal tension, audio-visual power, limited release, short availability. Television Netflix Ultra HD quality, Dolby sound, convenience, rewatchability, require subscription, reduced screen scale. No entry digital purchase, not available. Netflix exclusivity prevents rental/download. Clapperboard final thought. Carry On is a taut, performance-driven thriller designed for both big screen scale and intimate character focus. While the theater amplifies its intensity, Netflix ensures it remains a widely accessible and deeply engaging experience. Whether on a large projector or a personal tablet, the film's pressure cooker narrative, shadowy aesthetics, and psychological undertones make it a compelling watch across formats. Ultimately, for cinephiles and genre fans alike, the best way to experience the film is to start with a high-fidelity viewing on Netflix with headphones or a home theater, especially if the theatrical option has passed.